Good afternoon, everybody. That was Chris Wells, who was one of the bards of the bioregional movement. And I am going to talk about this concept of bioregionalism. Thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to be here in the Catskill Mountains. That song is called Dance for the Earth. And Chris is from the Sonoran Desert bioregion. Who here knows what bioregion you live in? If you know it, just call it out.
Hudson Valley.
Hudson Valley.
Catskills.
Catskills. Others. I live in the Connecticut River watershed. My home is Brattleboro, Vermont. And we'll talk about all of this. And I get the mic stand, the music stand together.
Yeah, he does it.
Thank you. I think it's good. You might gotta go with the clip here. Yeah. See if all this is? No. I think I'm good. Thanks.
The first song is called Water. That's why it
The word bioregion and the term bioregionalism come out of two different organizations thinking in the early 1980s about what it would take to address the environmental crisis. And these two groups, in very separate ways, saw that despite the successes of environmentalism, it was not solving the problem. In fact, things were getting worse and worse and worse in an accelerated way. And so they stopped and said, what do we need to do to reverse this trend? And we can look at climate change as one example of this, but there are many. Toxic buildup, the depletion of the oceans, contamination of water, loss of topsoil, loss of forest land, desertification. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. Those who are paying attention just see that the planet is rapidly driving towards a cliff. So they asked, what would it take to reverse that trend? And the movement came out of that. But it's difficult to sum up an international movement in 30 minutes. Kind of like trying to feed a hungry person by talking to them. So what I will try to do in this short time I have is to give you all a sense of what this movement is about, a taste or some texture or a smell of what is bioregionalism. And I'm going to start in that effort by leading you through a visualization, a little exercise. So sit back in your comfortable leather chairs here and close your eyes if you want to and just follow along with me. This is called the Bioregional Jump. Which is generally not done on such a windy day. So in your mind's eye, bend your knees from a standing position, hunch down and jump up high into the air in your mind's eye. With this jump, you are jumping up and out of what is called the White Sulphur Springs Fireman's Park. You are jumping away from Shore Road and that legal description called the Town of Liberty. You are jumping up out of all those artificially imposed boundaries that obscure the natural patterns of the earth around us. Jump high up into the air, out of Sullivan County, out of New York State, in fact, out of the United States. Up, up, up. In the middle of this glorious summer day. And now float down slowly and land in this mostly forested area near a long body of water called Swan Lake. And you can see, if you look at this lake from above, that it is part of a river, the west branch of the Montgomery River. Look upstream, up the Montgomery River, and see all of the forested land that collects water that drains into this river. This is the Montgomery Valley, or watershed. And in your mind's eye, look down and see that this river joins with other rivers and flows into a bigger river called the Delaware. And this river meanders south through towns and then a city and into the Delaware Bay in the ocean. And look at the land nearby around here and see that a range of weathered mountains forms a distinct and mostly forested region that we are at the western edge of. And this is the Catskills. To the north and west of us, there's another region of long lakes called the Finger Lakes region. And due north, one can see a long west-east valley called the Mohawk Valley. And above that, taller mountains called the Adirondacks. To the east is another long, straight river that flows south into the ocean, the Hudson, known to Native Americans as the river that flows both ways. See that the forest here is a mix of hemlock, oak, maple, beech, pine, and birch, with a diversity of agriculture scattered throughout. Sense the wild animals that live here, the herbs at the edge of the fields, the mushrooms growing underneath the forest floor, the marshes and ponds. Sense the bear and coyote, the swallow and beetle, and many new species more recently introduced. The bedrock here is mostly a reddish to greenish sandstone, and it's pretty clear that glaciers scoured these mountains a long time ago, and that most of this forest was cut a couple hundred years back, and yet most of it's regrown. The soil was depleted here, but in a few places one can see where it is being restored through new agricultural, forestry, and permaculture practices. From this new perspective, where you land after you've jumped, look around and feel that you are part of this place somehow, connected in some way that feels new and yet also very old. And there are others around too who see these things differently too. You sense that there is a distinctness to this region, a specialness, this mountainous headwaters, and that it is perhaps a bioregion. And as we bioregionalists like to say, welcome home. Shuffling papers here. So there's one little taste of bioregionalism. I talk about this concept as one really about politics and trying to form a new sense of politics. If we think of traditional Western politics, it's electoral politics. It's about getting the right person into office, maybe serving on town government. And if one is very active, then like giving money to or campaigning for a politician. But bioregional politics are very different from that. They are about coming to know the places where we live and re-inhabiting those places, becoming native to place. There are a number of principles that most bioregionalists follow. I'll read those out and describe them. This is all part of this process of re-inhabitation, of developing a new culture that is regenerative or restorative. Boundaries. Bioregionalists do a lot of thinking about boundaries, but not in the traditional sense. Our boundaries now are pretty much artificial. They were set by kings and governors back hundreds of years ago, and generally, most often have nothing to do whatsoever with the land. So boundaries for bioregionalists are, what is the boundary of this watershed? Where does water flow into a different river, the headwaters? What is the boundary of the climate? What is the coldest cold in the winter that determines what plants will grow here? What is the boundary pH of the soil that allows for certain things and not others? Those are the kinds of boundaries that we pay attention to as bioregionalists. Sustainability is another key principle to this movement. And we often go beyond what is sustainable to think about how can we restore or act in a regenerative way through our lives and our culture. Third principle is what we would call a life place. We think about our life places. And in coming to know the life place, we think about the history and natural history, the native or indigenous presence of this place, the patterns of water and air and soil, and what are the needs and the threats to this place. Meg talked about fracking, Meg talked about water quality. What are the needs? And then the laws that govern it, and are the laws that govern this place really attending to the needs of this place? Bioregionalists go to great lengths to learn the special characteristics of the places where we live. What makes this place, these Catskill Mountains, different from other places? What makes it special? Fourth principle is community. And bioregionalists are always working to build community, both amongst ourselves, but also connecting with others who might not share our philosophy or our beliefs, but who are committed to this place in their own ways. So how can we build bridges to those people who might think and believe differently? And then the fifth, probably the most important, is culture. Bioregionalists have come to believe that the way to create a sustainable culture or a sustainable society, world, is by incorporating culture. And by culture, I mean poetry, stories, music, but not just any poetry or story or music, as valuable as they are, specifically music that connects us to the land, poetry that teaches us about herbs or mushrooms, stories that tell the history of this place. That is the kind of culture that we foster as bioregionalists. A couple other quick things. I am going to end with a poem and then another song by Chris Wells. The song is called The Seed Hymn. It is an ode to seeds and those who cherish and nurture seeds. This poem is called a Pampas Grass Love Poem. It was written by a man named Garth Harwood, and it was written about a very specific plant called pampas grass that is considered a noxious invasive plant in much of the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington. It's a clumping perennial plant. It's originally from Australia, and many Californians just hate it with a vengeance. To compare it to something here, maybe quackgrass or Bishop's goutweed or Japanese knotweed are good examples that are present in this bioregion that this poem might be just as suitable for. The poem was written for the Klamath-Siskiyou bioregion and read at the 3rd Continental Bioregional Congress. We had better learn to love the pampas grass. The best of us try to be like it, invasive by habit and history, and finding ourselves on ravaged soil, we work to rebuild it, slowly. The work days of our lives doing what coarse pampas grass does too, adding instead of subtracting in the great breakdown. Neither life will count for much when done, except that others follow similarly, and the soil, the richness of life returns at a pace unbearable to human thought. The new land will have no place for us, nor for pampas. Pampas grass creates topsoil but cannot sprout in it because it can't compete with the new plants that brings. So we, land and culture building, create a new people who would not understand our killing origins or our long tolerance of greed. We too will die out one day to be replaced by something native. In this day, to love the redwood forest is to love past the trees to the soil and its builders. And we had better learn to love the pampas grass. Congresses. The way that the bioregional movement comes together is in these events called congresses. And congresses have happened all over North America. There are continental congresses where the entire movement comes together, and then there are bioregional congresses. There was a Gulf of Maine bioregional congress. There's an Ozark area community congress, Cascadia Congress. Cascadia is the region from southern Alaska all the way down through into northern California, and it's defined by the mountains and the water that rushes off of those mountains. That's how they define that bioregion. The Ozarks is defined like the Catskills as a mountain range. Gulf of Maine is the land that flows into what is the Gulf of Maine. Back on the rear wall there are a number of maps. There is a watershed map of the Cayuga River bioregion and the Connecticut River bioregion. There are landform maps that give a very different sense of the land than traditional US maps. There's also literature on the back table, some bioregional literature if people want to dive into this subject a little more deeply. And with that, my time is almost up, and we're going to end with another song, Seed Hymn. Thank you.
Seed of a bright new day, the sun's on the blessed way. Seeds
That's
of
why I've
the
been holding it, because it was actually
of the sky, seed of the mountains high, seed in the rolling sun, seed of a heart that spun, breathing seed, seed divine.